The Centre was jointly established by the Ministry of National Development and the Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources in 2008 to distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities. The CLC lecture series is one platform where urban thought leaders share best practices and exchange ideas and experiences. Today, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Boon Huat, former Chief Executive Director of the People's Association, to share with us his insights and experiences from his time at the PA in bringing communities together. So the lecture will be followed by a curated Q&A session with the audience, which will be moderated by Ms. Louisa May Koo, an Adjunct Senior Assistant Director at the CLC. So kindly hold all questions to the Q&A session. With this, let us start the session. Mr. Tan, please.
The basis of what I'm going to talk about is really my empirical experience. I would like to stress it's empirical. I make no apologies if I may make some provocative statements. You don't have to agree to my views. Feel free to challenge them if you like later. I had 2 stints at the People's Association. First time was 77, 79 as a young admin officer. I joined service in 74, so after 2 years, I ended up at the PA. When I started, I was called Assistant Director, Research and Statistics. Frankly speaking, there wasn't very much research. It was all really statistics. But within a very short period of time, because there were many changes, I had to change my job and I became called Director Administration. I had a very good mentor then. There's a gentleman called Lim Chin Tiong, who was the Chief Executive then. He came from the Foreign Service, but he was a very good chap and he taught me a number of things. I mean, he went out of his way as a chief, to talk to a young officer and sort of advise me and tell me how I could do my job better. But one of the best things he taught me really was the Confucianist way, which means the middle or the moderate course of action. Don't take the extreme position, and you always give your opponent or your adversary an honorable way out. So it's an important lesson to me. And 23 years after that, I returned in 2002 as the Chief Executive of the PA. The main theme of my talk will be about community engagement, why and how the PA does it, some of the pluses, some of the minuses along the way, and maybe I'll also make some suggestions about what government agencies, Singapore government agencies can do with the PA. All right? This is an outline of the contents, the PA's objectives, what happened to PA from the beginning, the early years, how the grassroots movement evolved, how the activities and programs also expanded and evolved. Then I'll go into the passion card. I think I don't know, how many of you have a passion card? Oh, very good, very good. Yeah. I'll talk about why I went into the passion card and its linkage with analytics, and maybe outline some of the challenges ahead. One of the reasons why I like to talk about the origins and so on, which I think, if you want to do something, you want to go forward, you need to know where you are. Of course, you know your objectives, but it's always important to know where you came from and how you originated. Sometimes we forget that part. We just look forward, where we are, look forward, forget about the past. Now, the PA is a very interesting and very unique organization. Unique in many ways. One, there's no other such agency around the world. During my term as Chief Executive, quite a number of foreign visitors came through the PA. And I always ask them, do you have something equivalent in your own country And actually the answer is no. The other interesting part about PA, and this applies to our local context, this is probably the only statutory board where the chairman by law is the Prime Minister. So it's specified in the PA Act that the chairman of the PA board is the Prime Minister. But he doesn't bother with day-to-day operations. He appoints a minister or a minister of state to be the deputy chairman. And the deputy chairman then is really the de facto person who manages day-to-day alongside with the chief executive and his staff. Okay, so it's unique. Now, it's a good also, I think, to look at the objectives. You have many statutory boards and agencies. Look at the objectives. It says, organization and promotion of group participation in social, cultural, educational, athletic activities for the people of Singapore, in order that they may realize that they belong to a multiracial community, the interests of which transcend sectional loyalties. This is interesting. Huh? Then the other one, establishment of institutions, etc. C, the fostering of community bonding, and so on and so forth. So when I had foreign visitors and I tried to explain what we do with community bonding, CCs, RCs, and so on, I mean, they tend to get quite confused, So I thought about it, and I thought the best way to describe it, in a sense, the function of the PA is like a ministry of national unity. Okay? I think PA is not the only institution that creates that helps bind the people together, or nation-building organization, but I believe that it is and will continue to be a key instrument of nation building. I think this will go on forever. One point I want to note now is that for you to make clear that in Singapore we are not interested in becoming, we're not a melting pot. I think public officers, particularly in this room, I think you should choose your words carefully. Sometimes we use it carelessly. What melting pot means is we don't worry about our past, we just become one kind of people for the future. But if you listen very carefully, always, our government leaders always say, you preserve your heritage, your cultural heritage, but you look at your common space and we build a national identity that way. Even I think yesterday I was watching the news, I think it was PM Lee at some clan association activity. I would like the clans to teach, your heritage, to maintain the heritage. So bear that in mind. Don't use the word melting pot. I think sometimes our local journalists and all that use all these terms quite loosely. So please be careful. Huh? We have lots of diversity in terms of race, language, and religion. But if you think about carefully, there are other forms of diversity. And the way we have evolved over the years, you find that our people actually go in different orbits, even from kindergarten. There are people who go to the PCF, NTUC kindergartens, and those who go to the Eton School and all the private kindergartens. And the kids, and the families, you move around a different orbit. Then, of course, your ITE, poly, and university, the orbits are also different. I mean, nothing wrong that there are different social orbits, but this must be recognized, and we have to be sensitive about it, and we have to address it. And I think this is one of the good functions. This is one of the functions of the PA. I recall an interesting anecdote, and I myself personally had a very interesting experience. I went overseas. When I came back after my undergraduate studies, I was exempted from military service for various reasons, for medical reasons. I felt guilty, so I joined the Volunteer Special Constabulary. So I was assigned to CNB, the Central Narcotics Bureau. And my job with my team was to go and look for those people who failed to turn up at the urine test. You know, you're supposed to come back and test with it. So we went into somewhere in Bukit Merah, a one-room flat. Bang on the door, the person wasn't there. A gentleman about in his 40s was there, whole body tattooed. You look around the one-room flat, no furniture, one or two mattresses. On one mattress, about 60, 70-year-old, very skinny man, whole body tattooed. And I said, hey, in Singapore we have this kind of situation? Because I didn't come from a very wealthy background, but still, you know, like middle class kind of background. My social orbit was totally different. So it was an eye-opener for me. So one of the things that PA strives to do is to, you know, tell people of all walks of life that there are different orbits. We know them, and PA would try to give people from different orbits, try to bring you together and understand that there's diversity, but try to build up that common space. You see, for PA to do his job, we do social, cultural, educational activities and so on and so forth. I want to stress there's a difference between means and the end. These are the means. You can do many, many things to bring people together, to interact, build social capital, as it were. But the end must be national unity. Must not confuse the means with the end. Sometimes, you know, we end up confusing the means and the end. All right? Now, a bit more about the background. In the early years, you know, there was a communist threat. So, what the government had done was, before that, in the post-war years, the British had a few community centers. And part of the reconstruction, and they offered things like cooking classes, cleaning class, sewing classes, and so on. I think when the new government came into power after '59, and I think LKY and his colleagues thought it was a good idea, and in fact the CCs expanded. And at one stage, I think we had well over 200 community centers. And see, in those days, the typical sort of communist tactic was the rural areas surround the city and then take over, revolution. So this was an attempt at countering it. So we had many, many CCs in those days, the rural area. I think some of the younger ones and some of our foreign friends looking around Singapore and say, what rural area have you had? But we had rural areas in those days. And those CCs were simpler. I don't think we managed to get you one of those very old ones where it's a timber frame place, zinc roof, the floor hardly any concrete. I think we couldn't find the kind of picture, but this is the best we could do. Those days, the CC names were like, Ama Keng, UT, Basun Pa, all these other exotic names. All right. One of the key things in the CCs in those days was that the government managed to persuade the local leaders, it could be the kampong heads, the Penghulu types, the local business chap, some clan association people, to become members of the CC management committee. And this is very important. See a picture of the Kampong Kembangan CC, 1960s, sewing classes then also. You remember in the early days of industrialization, the garment industry was very important to Singapore. So like Wing Tai and so on and so forth, they're making jeans and so on. All right. And there you see a picture of the late finance minister, Mr. Hon Swee Set. One of the reasons we show this picture was I wanted to say, between the early days and fast forward to the time, or not fast forward, even in the late 70s when I was in PA, he built the first $1 million CC This was Havelock CC. Okay? So quite a big transformation from very humble CC to $1 million CC. Partly as a result of that, many other constituencies, everyone clamored for the same treatment. So I would say that one of the things I did before I left my first stint in the PA was to work on a cabinet paper to say that we should give every constituency the possibility of a $1 million CC. The government would be prepared to give you a grant of up to $1 million, and then I think it was a matching grant of up to another $400,000, $1 million for basic facilities, and about 400,000 more for additional facilities. So after quite a lot of argy-bargy with the Ministry of Finance, we finally got that policy through. Okay, you can see in PA there are many C's. CCMC, CCC, RC, and so on and so forth. And here's a quick timeline of how they developed and what happened over a period of time. I think getting the local community to be involved in the management of the CCs was a very clever stroke on the part of the founding fathers of Singapore. I mean, it can all be run by staff as it was done in the British days. But I think the missing ingredient is ownership by the community. So he was very clever in doing this. But in those days, it started off with the local community leaders. I want to say that, late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was very far-sighted and was always obsessed about succession. Or another way of putting it in today's words, about sustainability. One of the reasons why I ended up in the PA, my first stint in 77-79, was because he saw that Singapore was transforming. A lot of people were industrializing. Many people were becoming professionals. You were less of businessmen, more being professional. People were being educated at the local universities, also foreign universities. So what had happened then was he beefed up the PA admin service component from 1 or 2 to 5. And the reason he had us there was he wanted us to try to get more professionals to join the grassroots organizations. So we spent a lot of time in those days visiting the professional organizations, the architects, the engineers, the doctors, even the nurses and so on, to get these organizations to try to ask their members to join the grassroots as well. And it has evolved quite well. Originally, after the 1964 riots, PMO formed goodwill committees. Then they became CCCs, still under PMO. But by 1993, they were also put and integrated with the PA, the rest of the PA. Another interesting thing, when around the late 70s, around the time I was there too, there was also a realization that with resettlement, HDB resettlement and so on, the villages were being broken up. So your local community leadership, community grassroots leadership was also being broken up. So that's why this was Goh Chok Tong's time. We decided to start residents committee. So there was an experiment. One of them was at Marine Parade. And after a while, it took hold. But initially, the RCs were staffed by HDB staff, or staff under HDB, hired under HDB. They may not be your HDB estate management staff, but they're hired by the HDB to do this. So it started that way. But again, in the early 90s, they were absorbed by the People's Association. Okay. Now, I want to stress that there is an interesting difference between the PA grassroots people and the voluntary welfare organization, the NGOs. they have a role to play. I'm not saying that I'm not running them down. The VWOs have a quite narrower focus. Usually the excuse me, disabled or less well off they look after. NGOs may have a particular interest, whether it's animal rights or women's rights or whatever. That's fine. But one interesting thing about the GROs is right from the beginning, they're imbued with the kampong spirit, the kampong self-help spirit, the gotong royong. Remember the early days when they were building, mobilize the community to start building their own roads, help lay out the water pipes and things like that. Okay, so imbued with this kind of spirit, and along the way things change. I mean, today, my time and even now, I mean, they've got community emergency response teams. They've got community on patrol. The police help sponsor that. SCDF help sponsor the certs. Maybe some of these work very well because at the time, common boss, the Minister for Home Affairs was Wong Kan Seng. Deputy Chairman PA was Wong Kan Seng as well. So a lot of these things got going and it was good. And one example, I think the best example that I can give you of this community mobilization was during the SARS period. Remember the SARS period? Because it was totally new, there was a lot of fear going on, but we were able to mobilize the grassroots to do a number of things. We helped with contact tracing. We did the market temperature checks, distributed the food to those who were under quarantine. We distributed the SARS kits to almost 1 million households, And all this, you see, because you involve these 30,000 or so grassroots leaders, I think that helps build a sense of confidence in the public. If it's all done by government agencies or by civil servants or by police or civil defense, it has a different tenor to it. So I like to think that because you involve the community so much, that people felt, hey, you have good confidence that things are under control and things will get better. Yeah? And apart from this, also the government organized quite a lot of community dialogues. So this was done at the ground, and also there were places where we invited the senior grassroots leaders from every constituency to come and listen to the government explain what was going on, what the next steps were, what the risks were, and so on and so forth, in a very open and frank way. So I think these build, that maintains the kind of morale and confidence. Another impact of the resettlement was the HDB, the government policy of having ethnic quotas in the housing estates, breaking away from enclaves. That also is interesting because it also changes the nature of the community leadership and community bonding. And because it's new people too, it means we have to work on it to ensure that the minorities in these areas do not feel left out. In the past, they're together, more of their own people. You don't feel so uncomfortable. But if you go to a place now where there are very few Malays or very few Indians, most of your neighbors are Chinese, and also different. Are new to you. The sense of discomfort. So in a way, that's why also the RCs and the way they work was important. And within the CCCs and the CCMCs, etc., we have women's committees, youth committees, and so on. Quite a lot. Minority committees and so on. Interest groups. Right? And in some ways, I used to tell people, PA had the largest retail chain in Singapore. We had 100 plus community centers. We had about 600 residence committee centers, bigger than 7-Eleven or whoever it was at that time. And we really have a big retail chain. Okay, we had many kinds of activities. In the old days, it was very simple. Life was simple. So a ping pong table, a basketball court, even a television set was able to bring people down to watch TV. I don't know whether some of you have seen the pictures, television in a metal box because you're afraid that somebody makes away with the television. And not many people own a television set in those days anyway. So that, and even reading newspapers, these were things that brought people together. But of course, over the years, it's totally changed now. Even in my time, for example, apart from yoga and other activities which are more upmarket and more modern, we even have pole dancing in the CCs. At one time, some of my grassroots leaders were saying, "You want pole dancing? Is the moral?" I said, "No, it can be good. And if you do it openly, there'll be no monkey business." Right? So we have things like that now. Okay? And I think it will keep on changing. The activities go on. So the idea behind all this change is to attract people. And why do we attract people? We want people to mix. To understand that there are other people with different life, different pattern, different culture, different whatever. The only trouble that, some of the issues I had to grapple with is sometimes the PA staff and the grassroots forget, what is means and what is the end. So sometimes they just focus on organizing a slick event. For example, I critique even the way we run our National Day dinners. One, I noticed every time I attended several, and you find that, or every year I attend a few, and you go and you see that it's first same old aging crowd. Second, the program must have one Indian dance, Malay dance, one Chinese dance, and nobody explains what these dances are all about. The other issue is the community also follow the government way, everything outsourced. So what you do, you go and hire these good high singers from Malaysia and come and sing. You lose the purpose, you see. So at the National Day function, you have many committees, Malay activities, Indian activities, they do cultural dancing. Why don't you involve your own people? Also, why don't you involve the schools? So, so some of them do it. I'm not against outsourcing. Sometimes you need a star, a J.J. Lin or somebody to come, and then you get a bigger crowd. That is fine. But you must balance it out and have that community part. And part of this also is good because there's interaction. There was one good case I noticed. This was what's the name of the early dementia. Anyway, they got school kids to dance, Chinese kids to do Malay dance, and so mix. And what was very good too, the MC, asked the kid, "What did you learn in this process?" And he said, "I learned about my Malay friends." The Chinese boy says that. Then the Malay goes, "Yeah, I now understand a little bit more about Indian dancing." So at that age, you get people to see that there are differences, and we should enjoy, embrace those differences. And there's another bugbear which may be not entirely related. Most Singaporeans, after you leave school, you never sing a national anthem anymore. You even forget the words. Right? So one of the things I did in PA was during National Day dinner, instead of the MC saying, stand up for the national anthem or whatever, I said, MC must say, "Ladies and gentlemen, let us sing the national anthem." And everybody sings. Okay? I think it's important that we do things like that. And this is what PA is all about. The National Day dinner is like this. I mean, there are other things which I thought were very not well done at that time. For example, in the old days, national service send-off ceremony was at the CC, right? Because those days, early days, there was a lot of resistance to national service. But they continued to invite a table of national servicemen. They come in uniform. They sit on their own in the table. Nobody acknowledges them. They just eat them by themselves and then they go off. That's not right. At least, when you're on stage, you should acknowledge and say, ladies and gentlemen, these guys in uniform, they are there for that purpose. And, also, I think, out of convenience, I think what they have done in the old days, you invite the national servicemen from your area. So you can say, this young man lives here. These are the guys who protect us in times of emergency. But out of convenience, I suppose MINDEF say, okay, this platoon you go, or this section you go. So the meaning is lost. Okay? I mean, this is an opportunity for many things, even for government policies, It could be the occasion where instead of making all kinds of long policy speech, you could say, ladies and gentlemen, this year in my constituency, so many new babies were born. And you encourage this sort of thing. Or you can say, well, ladies and gentlemen, we have so many new citizens. And one of the things we do in PA is when they're new citizens and we are able to do that, we get them to help organize some of these activities, including National Day, so they may feel part of the community. And the community also sees them, as people who are us, not who have come here and get all the benefits. Do you understand what I mean? So these are things that's why the difference between means and an end. What is the end? So you want to organize something, think about what is the end you want. What you want the people who experience it to go away with. Don't just give goodie bags, to keep them until the end of the event. I mean, there are a couple of constituencies which I visited where it's done very well. Don't need goodie bags, people come. People stay to the end. They sing and dance together as a community. Wonderful. Okay, something you might know about PA, the CAPEX, the building government policy after the $1 million thing has evolved to, I think, 90% government CAPEX, 10% raised by the community, subject to a cap. I can't remember what the cap is. Anyone from PA, maybe you can remember, you know what the cap is today, I don't know. But this is important, because there's always that participation of 10%, and that is that ownership bit. In fact, the ownership sometimes gets to be a big problem because sometimes we have to close CC because the population has shifted. But these fellows feel that they help build the CC, they don't want to close the CC. Even if it is suboptimal, not economic, they want to keep the CC. So, but that sense of ownership. The other thing is that most of the, apart from the staff complement which PA provides, the operating costs of the CC are actually through fundraising, through revenues, through courses, events, and so on and so forth. So there's quite a lot of fundraising in the community. I was giving an anecdote here. During the Youth Olympic days, first Youth Olympics here, the YOG people came to me and said, we are short of money for the community run, for the torch relay. Why don't you ask, at the time, 84 constituency, each one give me $50,000. Then I have $4.2 million to organize my run. So I asked him, number one, do you know how hard it is for them to raise $50,000? So number two, I say, what do you give me in return? Do you allow my grassroots leaders to run and so on? Oh, this cannot, that cannot, this cannot, that cannot. That's it, everything cannot. Raising money, raising money is very difficult. You go and raise money on your own. So I told them, no deal. They said, yeah, no deal. So raising money in the community is not easy. I mean, some are more fortunate than others. You've got benefactors, you've got some people who will give you. But in the old days, it was easier. In the old days, quite interesting, another anecdote. The treasurer of the CCMC is not the man who keeps accounts. The treasurer is the one who donates money. And he looks at you, he says, "Wow, he says, I put down 10,000, what are you going to offer?" So everybody raises money there. That was the way, because businessmen can do that those days. Like, I think Havelock CC, that area, all those Edinburgh market, the what? abalone kings and all those people, they can say 50,000, whatever it is. But professional, you say 10,000, 20,000, it's different. I am salary man, I'm not a businessman. So there's a big difference. So raising money today, there's a lot more salarymen than businessmen. Okay, now let me talk about passion card. I told you I was in assistant director research then. But there was no research. I read statistics. And when I arrived, there was one officer who was very proud because we had a room we always bring the visitors to. The room had all kinds of, it's like Lego, you stick, the name of the CC, what courses you have, and so. So it's all nice, very beautiful charts, but very static, and in a way meaningless. So what? You've got a pretty thing to show visitors. That was my first problem there. Then when I went back to PA as a chief, another thing happened. Now, at that time, assistant director research, now you have director research. And what happened? The director research presented me with a statistical booklet, a book. Books closed 31st December, year 1. Presented to me on year 2, December year 2. So 12 months after books closed, you come up with this huge compilation. You open it up, there's no analysis, it's just statistic. So many people came here and there. Right? And then asked me to present it to the board. And the chairman of the board is the Prime Minister. So I look at it and say, now you're 1 year late. Number 2, no analysis. How can you do that? But apparently they've been doing that for years and it's accepted. So I said no. Then if you look down at the numbers, they show I have 10,000 participants. So I say that 10,000 unique individuals, or 1,000 individuals coming 10 times, 100 coming, what does it mean? And what is the background of these people? Don't know. What is your real penetration? Don't know. Now, just now I was talking about that even our grassroots leadership. At that time we had roughly 30,000. I discovered that more than half of our residents committee did not have minority members. Let's say you're a residents committee, and you're supposed to engage the community. Of course, I know that typically there's only about less than 10% of Malays, or up to 15% of Malays, maybe each constituency, and maybe about 10% of Indians, roughly like that. But at least 1 or 2, you see, you have 30 members in the RC, but all Chinese. It cannot be, you can't do this. Why? Because people don't look at numbers. And after a while they say, it is like that. You cannot get them because they are not interested. I say, have you made the effort? Or even if you made the effort, you failed this year, you must continue making the effort because that's what PA is about. It's cross-sectional representation as much as you can. Of course, you can't force it to say it must be 10 or 8% or exactly that way. You don't. But I say minimum at least 1. And then later on you can do more, get more. You see? So these are things which to be done. So I felt quite uncomfortable, and many times they were quite tell me 10,000, 100,000, whatever thousand representation. I say, are you sure that are they your residents or not? Because sometimes people will pass their friend. I mean, it's okay. You can go to other places and do things. It's fine, but you cannot do that all the time. And so you have something like phantom, almost like phantom members. I can't do that. Another anecdote, see, Wong Man Sing is like that. That's why I enjoy working with him. He was at a block party, and the block party is supposed to have invite people in the residents to come down to the block and interact. So the chairman says of the RC says, "Oh, see, I have so many residents here. All my residents." First thing Wong Kan Sing does is he walked up to one resident, "Look here, Tolo, where do you live?" Do you live here or do you live somewhere else? So this is good. That's what I like about Wong Kan Seng. You know, he takes after, I read this in one of Jack Welch's books. People respect what you inspect. You don't inspect like this. You know, people pull wool over your eyes. And then but you also must be, as a leader, must be very consistent. I tell you how consistent it was. When we were breaking ground to build our new headquarters in the Victoria Institution, I said, we have the grassroots leader, we have the deputy chairman, all that to help break ground. I said, why don't you get the child of our staff to stand next to because it's future for the future, we are building for the future. So I told Mr. Wong, I said, these are children of our staff. So he turned to the little boy, he says, who is your father? Point him out for me. So he was checking up on me. But I knew, so I gave him the facts. I gave him the real thing. But this is, I'm saying, those of you who will become bosses in future, you must remember this consistently, and then people respect what you inspect. If you don't inspect, watch out, discipline all goes. All right? Now, analytics, why did I go into it then? There's another reason. Each CC and all that maintain its own membership card, everything done manually. So it never updated. So I said, can't we do something else? Part of my inspiration was also what some of the retailers do and like what Walmart does. Walmart's margins are very low, but they have a real-time real-time data on your transactions. At the same time, so you have stock control. If you are in a manufacturing or retail business, stock control is the key. Because if you are overstocked, you're holding a lot of goods, a lot of money, not getting returns. If you are understocked, you run out of stock, your customers are not happy. So stock control is important. So that actually stimulated me to say, why can't we have a national card? And one of my colleagues came up with a passion, PA passion card, and it's a good idea. Because technically, if you use this carefully and you scan it or you just swipe it, there's a record and you can track participation and where the person comes from. I mean, of course, you can say this data can be misused. Of course, data can be misused as we are now finding out about Facebook and so on. But if you use it properly, I think creates very valuable insights. Also, if you do it properly, some of the staff or the grassroots leaders, they say, I cannot achieve this, I cannot achieve that. But there are many different outlets, right? Once you bring it up, you show which are the outlets that are surpassing everybody else, and which are the ones that are very weak. Then you take a look and learn from one another. So that's what it's all about. So I moved into this, and then in a way, I'm very passionate about analytics because of this. I mean, sometimes the problem with analytics is we have silo. Sometimes even within the same agency, within your department, you have data silos. I think we'll overcome this. And now with your livable cities and smart cities, smart nation, you're going to have millions and millions of sensors, terabytes and terabytes of data. Yes, they are good to tell you what's happening now, but if you can bring all that together, you go into predictive, you go into insights, you go into trends, you go into changes. And it can be anywhere, many, many different forms. For example, even the trains, maintenance of trains. I mean, your training, your manual engineering manual, you must repair or maintain this out. But you have a lot of this data, you have a lot of sensors going around. Maybe you need to challenge what the manufacturer tells you about maintenance. And you don't want to over-maintain, neither do you want to under-maintain. So again, if you collect all this data and analyze all this data, you will be able to help you. And then for agencies, for example, that are giving lots of money, for example, who was it the other day, lost $40 million. SkillsFuture, was it? They lost $40 million because if you have simple analytics in place, you will know that certain patterns cannot be, something's wrong there. And I'm quite sure that income tax and all this, they will benefit from this kind of stuff. So a lot of government agencies. And I feel I think, not unjustified, that the kind of political pushback that happened after 2011, because we all dropped the ball. ICA dropped the ball, nobody was looking at immigration numbers properly. HDB and I don't know who else, you have a backlog of housing. Then, of course, the public transport, you have too many migrant workers and competing for limited space. Nobody was watching the numbers. So now, better watch the numbers. Earlier on, during my time, we talked about knowledge-based economy. Today, I'm telling you, we are analytics economy. So, some of these things I want to say. You be careful, because my time is running out. Watch changing demographics and circumstances. What you did in the past may not work now and in the future. I think agencies and public officers, you need to work closer together. And not only community engagement between government and people, but even among agencies, and sometimes within agencies too. And also I would advocate that the agencies go out, engage with PA, go and meet the people, and don't forget, there are always emerging generations of people, younger people plus new migrants, who don't understand some of the basic tenets, why Singapore does what it does. Why do we have co-pay health insurance? Right? Why do we have ERP and COE instead of complaining about it all the time? Why do we do things the way we do it? I think these are things that agencies, not when there's a crisis, before there's a crisis, go engage the grassroots, go engage the people well in advance. So when there's a crisis, you already have made the connection. The crisis resolution will be a lot easier for you. Okay, so I hope you get better interagency understanding. But there's this slogan, whole of government. Don't get thrown away by it. Doesn't mean all government agencies have to work all together. I think so long as you should work together only if it makes sense. For example, this from my home team experience, you don't need all the agencies to work together to go on a raid. Only if it makes sense. Maybe CNB should work with police on this particular event. SCDF work on a particular project. So not whole of government doesn't mean whole. You wait for whole, it is whole without the W. Whole, big hole. Okay, so parting shot about analytics. It's out there, computing power, everything is better now, much easier. Go harness it. But one important thing about this, don't leave this to your IT people. You, the managers, the users, you must understand what. Go and find out a little bit more analytics and find out how, if you know what is happening, if only you can know what's happening, you will do your job a heck of a lot better. Okay, I've run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming this afternoon. I'm sure Mr. Tan has lifted the veil of mystery that surrounds PA. I mean, for me, PA, my only interface with PA is when I use my passion card at Cold Storage. and of course, the CCs, I think that's the common face for many of us as PA. So I'm glad to hear about the social mobilization and all the grassroots organizations that actually form the foundation of PA. So maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions at a go, and then I will invite Mr. Tan to respond. So can we have the first question, please?
Hi, my name is Martha. I'm a visiting researcher at CLC. And I was interested in what you said, Mr. Tan, about how you had noticed that in in the community centers, some of the leadership was not very diverse. It was all Chinese. There weren't many minority populations that were engaged in leadership. I was wondering if you could elaborate at all on various strategies to incorporate different people or get different people to want to participate, and how do we go about bringing diversity and making sure it's just not all one type of person that's taking part in the CCs.
Thank you very much, Martha. Okay, maybe we'll take one more question and then I'll let. Can I have another question, please? Anyone? Yes, the gentleman here.
Hi, I'm Wei Liang from HDB. I'm asking about the analytics part, and you talk about passion card, you talk about how data shouldn't be in silos in PAs, and how would, or do you have any examples of like how PA has been sharing such information with other agencies, and what kind of procedure would it be like in terms of sharing such information with other agencies?
I do it a very Singaporean way. You know, I don't fully like using this tool, but we do have an annual awards system. So you get points if you organize this, you organize that, you get this. So one of the important point area is the diversity part. Make sure you have that diversity. So if, for example, if you have good ethnic diversity in your grassroots leadership, you get extra brownie points. If you don't get brownie points. But that is, again, means to an end. I think what's more important that you explain to the leaders why it is important to have that diversity. I think once they understand it, they don't just play and manipulate, because it's easy. You can appoint somebody who's a sleeping member of the particular race and say, I got that member. But important thing is to get that message through, that why do you need this? And in the end, you want to have the diversity, the representation, the feedback channels, and so on. And once this gets through, I would say most of the grassroots leaders are very responsible people, and they go on out and they do this. So this is something. One of the things I instituted, and I think it probably carries on, is every 6 months, I have a rotating dinner with the different CCC and CCMC chairman and vice chairman. And this is where I use this as a tool for me to share some of the results that we have. I mean, if I'm concerned that there's too much of this or too little of that, or also to discuss what else we need to do. I mean, I remember one stage, this was before it was a crisis, because as a result of one of PM Lee Hsien Loong's National Day rally speeches, I went back and I said, look, because we have so many foreigners coming in, we should form a group among the grassroots called the Integration and Naturalization Champions, so that they should actually look into ways, I won't prescribe it, look into ways of engaging the new immigrants into the community activities. I mean, you may not be able to get them all, but you get some. Okay? And if you get the right ones, they're like your influencers, they pass on the message to their own brethren. Okay, I hope that addresses your question. I think the other question is whether PA shares. I don't think PA really shares this at this time. I mean, they do it within themselves for their own purpose. And I think for them also it is probably not as well developed as I would have liked. Unfortunately, my runway was very short. When I hit the particular age, I had to retire. So I wish I had 3 more years. If I had 3 more years, I think I would have institutionalized a few more things with analytics. Yeah.
So maybe I just tag on to that question. So now that you have this analytics going, especially with Passion Card, has it sort of improved your outreach, for instance? Because you kind of now know what is the kind of profile that maybe uses the activities at the CCs. So where there are gaps, how have you sort of tried to
For this, I cannot give you an empirical answer. I can give you a theoretical one because I've been out of PA for about almost 8 years now. But I would say this, that the tools are there. One thing I asked the other day, when I left PA, we had something like just below 50% household penetration of passion card. In other words, half the households in Singapore, about 1 million households, have the passion card. So recently I met the new chief executive. I asked him this question, and I think he said it was beyond 75-80% penetration rate. So the passion card is there, and the potential for him to use the information is there. So this is where, if they do it well, they do it consistently, they'll be able to know. And when you know, then you know what you need to do. Especially you can know in comparison to somebody else. If somebody else has achieved a much higher rate of engagement, then you ask yourself, why not yourself? Also, sometimes you may find that you are the bulk of your programs are reaching a particular segment. For example, mostly senior citizens and whatever, and maybe young children, but not the working youth, for example. Then this prompts the question, now that we know that we are not engaging enough, what we want to do. So you can't prescribe what should be done, but at least it raises a question, and it then incumbent on the grassroots leaders and the PA staff to work out how they can then try to improve on the engagement of particular groups. Right.
You're mentioning about if you have given 3 more years, or a few more years, you would have institutionalized some more. Can you share with us some of those that allow us to understand how your thoughts is and what is PA is developing? It will help us quite a lot to understand the PA future.
I think if I had the chance, I would have got it to the point where the grassroots, the staff, the grassroots and everyone has an opportunity periodically to look at the analysis of the data or the participation data that comes out. So for example, are you reaching your minorities? In terms of age, let's say your own constituency age profile is a certain level. Are you getting roughly a representative profile correspondingly to what you have, or have you got it upside down? Is it good or bad? I don't know. Good or bad, it depends also. Sometimes. Are the people who take part in your programs and activities residents in the area? And from a PAHQ level, it doesn't matter. So long as you're engaged with the PA, any outlet, I don't mind. But if you are the local RC chairman, and most of the people who take part in your activities come from not within your zone, then your question arises, why aren't you engaging the residents in your zone? And there could be good reasons, maybe not. But then if you look at it, at least it prompts the question, how do you want to improve? And if you want to improve, probably if there's a system, the system works well, you can look and see, hey, this particular RC somewhere else is doing so well. Let me go to him and learn his tricks. How did he do it? So this is what I would have liked to do. It becomes part of the system that here you have, it's like you have meters and gauges. You see something, in the red or green zone. If it's in the red zone, then you better ask yourself, how do you get back to the green? So if I had the time, I think I would have liked to institutionalize this and make this thing, the data, the analysis of the data available down to the operating, the people on the ground, the grassroots leaders and the staff in a very systematic way.
Yeah, hi, I'm Najib from Sports Singapore. So, Sports Singapore was previously called Sports Council. So, in recent years, we also have moved into the nation building perspective through sport. With regards to your parting shot on better interagency understanding, do you think it's good that PA and Sport Singapore are complementing each other, or it's like counterproductive because it's overlapping and and there doesn't seem to be a distinct line in between. I mean, it's all benefit for the whole community, but I just wanted to have your opinion on that.
Well, I don't know what the situation is today, but during my time, I thought we could and should have worked more closely together. I'll give you an example. Whenever there were SEA Games or Asian Games, Sports Council would come to me and say, why don't you get the grassroots to write letters of encouragement to our sportsmen? So I said, yeah, we could do that, but we don't know who your sportsmen are. Which constituency do they live? Which CC nearest do they live to? Then I can give the name to the CCMC chairman. He can invite the athlete to come down at some of our events and show the face. Then when you write a letter of support or encouragement, it comes with a certain feeling. Otherwise, you're just writing for the sake of writing. You see? So this, I felt there was a disjoint. Of course, maybe the problem could also be with the NSAs, whether they, you cannot say that. The NSAs will tell you they are too busy training, But once in a while, you can come in, and even frankly speaking, if you're a professional sport, you have to do some PR. You do it, right? So I think there was this kind of disjoint was there. The other thing is slightly different. I think maybe when we first inherited the constituency sports club from Sports Council, again, I think there's a bit of a disjoint because they were more concerned about competition. In fact, sometimes they're quite absurd. Part of the competition rule, you must be a resident to compete, it's an inter-constituency game. So some people change their address, it's the same, almost like the primary school registration, change their address in order to represent a particular, to buy over the sportsman, So I wanted to change that, and I think I tried to go for a more inclusive approach, which actually I learned from the Americans. There's an American association, not American school, not American club. And I got to know the president very well. What they try to do is get, in a sports team, the kids have all different abilities. So you don't only focus on the good players, Everybody gets a chance to play. And part of it is the team building. And also the realization that the good players must help the not so good players as well. You see? So that little bit of a disjoint. So there's a little bit of a disjoint that way. But this part working with Sports SG, I'm not so sure, whether in this case it was Sports SG or whether it was the NSAs that, I still think, and don't forget, at that time there was a lot of unhappiness too about foreign talent. Foreign, your table tennis people. They are always there, they are on top, but they don't come down to the ground. They don't engage with anyone. We don't know where they live. They don't come down. So they don't belong, we don't belong. So why do we support? Some of these things you've got to understand. But one important thing about agencies when you want to work together, the important thing is to couch what you want done in common objectives. For example, Sports Council say, you write letters to my sportsmen. So I said, for what? Does nothing for me. Your athlete doesn't rally my people together, what for? Similarly, another experience I had when I was also sitting on the Arts Council, there was an Indian dance teacher, she's very passionate about Indian dance. She said, Mr. Tan, your CC should house us, should take us in, subsidize us. I said, why should I? Your job, you want to promote Indian dance, which is fine. But if you said to me, Mr. Tan, can you help us, house us? In return, I will make an effort at, taking part in your community activities, and I will also, make the effort to explain to the other communities what Indian culture is all about, and this mutual understanding thing, I will be more receptive. But if you say, I want to do it because you owe it to me, art and culture is very important to Singapore, you owe it to me, I said, no, it doesn't work like that. So if you want to work with agencies, another agency must say, look, what is our common interest in it? We should work together. Right? And then I think you will get a lot more traction that way.
Benoit, can you share with us the spread of the CC and how does it sort of been selected throughout the whole island? Is it because of demographic that you build bigger CCs? Because some of the CC facility is much better than the rest, location-wise and how. Because I'm looking at I used to sit on the board of SAFRA, which is also a reservist association, but that one is concentrated very much on the NS men, but we have families extended, a lot of facilities like swimming pool. How do you see the CC under PA will be evolving going forward? How do you see the overall landscape?
Well, you should be asking me that. You should be asking
Well,
me.
I mean,
Ask
it's good
the
to say
WCF. But I would say that today there are different CCs of different size and so on and so forth. Partly historical, because the CCs build and evolve over a period of time. You don't build one today and just because we have a new model we demolish and then all of us have the same uniform model. So at the time it's a constant evolution. In some instances, as I said, population moves out. Then there's the opportunity you close down and a new location. I wanted to say something tongue-in-cheek to HDB people here. In my time, in the early days, we always felt that HDB gave us the lousiest piece of land. Most uneven, a lot of slopes, so, and which they didn't want for their HDB building. But that is, I think, partly true. And so location and so on and so forth. I think it's changing. I think they're trying out different models. For example, Tampines Hub is a totally. That was started around the time as I was about to leave. So the talk started, whether you want to have. Sometimes some people use the term like mega CCs. I don't like that kind of term. But idea, do you work like Tampines Hub within, co-located with Sports SG and so on, which is an interesting thing. Like the people from URA here, I've often asked, why must every school have a sports field? Why must you sports council? I mean, you have ASPA, you have your own sports facilities, and universities, you have your own, and so on and so forth. I tell you why. I visited I can't remember exactly the name of the city in Japan. There's a municipal building, and all kinds of sports facilities, swimming pool, multi-purpose hall, and so on. The interesting thing was, because land scarcity, in Japan, around the Tokyo area, in the morning, the schools use the facility. So use the swimming pool, there's an indoor running track, the gyms and so on. In the afternoon, the retirees use the place. In the evening, some working people who are not out karaokeing and drinking use the place. So in a way, it is integrated, and I would say the utilization, it's making full use of scarce resources. I'm not quite sure why we never quite went that way here. Everybody wants to have their own swimming pool, their own sports field, and so on. I'm not quite sure whether we've come together to take a look at this. So things like this, I think need a relook.
Any URA officers here who want to respond to
Yeah,
that, who dare to respond to that?
It's a question. I really don't know why we haven't quite done that. So yeah, I'm one of the critiques I had about Sports Council then. You see, for me in the PA, in a way, my KPI to my staff, and also, unfortunately, I got put KPI to the grassroots too, was utilization. Whereas I was told then, rightly or wrongly, that for the sports facilities, cleanliness and safety. So utilization is not the issue, no. So if it's not used, maybe sometimes the staff feel not used even better. That doesn't get dirty and no safety issues. So I think some of these things you need to relook. I'm sure things have changed, since then.
May I ask you a difficult question?
Yes.
You were saying earlier on the PA Act, the chairman is actually the PM, and the deputy chairman is one of the minister. So how would you respond? I think this question comes up quite often in the press and in Parliament. How would you respond to people who say that the PA is basically a political partisan outfit?
Good one.
Mm.
People say the difference between PA and the PAP is one P. Well, I think we should all be, again, just like I mentioned, you've got to be careful with your choice of words, right? About melting pot and so on. Political and partisan are two different things. Everything that any government agency does has got political implications. HDB, you don't get your job done properly, you don't get your housing supply properly, a big political problem. Question is it partisan? Let me put it to you this way. No politician has ever come up to me and said, I want you to do this to fix the opposition fellow. That one I can sumpah, it never happened to me. Secondly, see, all our activities are open to everyone, including our foreign friends. You can come down to our CC, take our yoga class, whatever. Not a problem. And when you come, I don't ask you, are you a party member of this party, that party? Not that party, I kick you out. The same thing happens with my grassroots leaders. I don't ask them which party that they belong to. But if any of them, any party, if they are during the CC activities or RC activities are waving the party flag, then I will tell him, cease and desist. If you don't, I kick you out. But apart from that, doesn't happen. During election time, for example, we are very careful. We disallow any party political activity in the RC center or in government premises, just like you would do the same in all your government agencies. You don't allow party political. But I cannot stop grassroots leaders from joining political parties. That's your right as a citizen of Singapore to join any political party. My staff, the staff also, you can join any party that you want. I'm sure that there among the PA staff and among the grassroots, there are those who vote one way and the other. It doesn't bother me. So we don't bother about that at all. So it's not. So our services and so on, we are very open. Everyone, every Singaporean, as I say, even our visitors, even our foreign workers, they are welcome to use our facilities. Not a problem. So it's always there. Of course, I think the key point is the appointment of the advisors. To this, I would ask the question, it's up to the government to decide to appoint whoever they want to appoint. Maybe we don't, if we had a coalition government, it would be different. Then I think in the coalition party, they would ask to be represented. But in our case, no, we're not in a coalition situation. So that doesn't happen. Right? That's it. That's it.
I'd like to ask Boon Huat to share with us how things might go forward. Because I come from the first question the lady was asking, whether PA or community center can be a point for integration of different races as well as for foreigners who want to be part of Singapore. I think you mentioned that you could do more, right? One thing which I engage with a lot of expatriates, if they are here as a working under an employment pass, if they bring their partners and they are not having an employment pass, they are having what we call a dependent pass. And there's a lot of difference. I'm just sharing with you that it is a lot of difference. And how does this sort of, shall we say, I wouldn't call them citizens, I always say part of the community in Singapore, can utilize the people association as well as the community center to integrate a little bit better?
Mhm. Yeah, of course, they are welcome to use our, they're welcome to come and take part in our activities. I mean, if they are paying activities, they pay like everybody else. I think PA, we don't have a PR rate and citizen rate. And I mean, in some places, we do make it a point to actively engage them. Because I remember up north, near one of the, I think Woodlands or MLT, one of these places where there's a concentration of foreign workers from the subcontinent. They love cricket. So, we engaged them, we brought them in, and then we play cricket. We allowed them to play cricket, and we joined them to play cricket. So they feel, in a sense, welcome as well, you see. And on my own part, where I can, I've worked with foreign embassies. I've worked with like the American Association, for example. Sometimes we have joint projects and so on. The Japanese Association, interestingly enough, have this red and white competition with one of our CCs, one or two of our CCs, I can't remember. Every year it goes on. So some of these things are there all the time. So we don't really discriminate. It's just whether what we have on offer meets their requirements, because ours sometimes can be basic, although we do have some higher end offerings as well. Okay.
All right, if you could join me, perhaps, to give Mr. Tan a big warm round of applause for sharing his insights about